Hey Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel with Chris Peterson and Danny Gillette. In today's video, we break down the offensive depth chart for the 2022 season. But before we get to that, make sure that you like this video, get into the comments section to give us your thoughts on the Huskers, and also subscribe to this channel for more great Nebraska content. As always, go Big Red. Hey Husker fans, welcome back to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast. I'm Chris Peterson of Husker Big Red, and joining me as always, my co-host is Danny Gillette of thegreatcornholio.org. How's it going this morning, Danny?
It's going good. We're 13 days away from the opener, so football is in sight. I am excited, and it's good to finally get to the news cycle of the summer where we actually have things to talk about and games to preview.
Yeah, 13 days away from Dublin. The Huskers are having, I believe, their final scrimmage today, and then they're going to, start honing up the depth chart, focusing on Northwestern this following week. They're going to have to make their trip to Dublin soon. So, it's kind of getting to that time where, you kind of finalize things, and I think they probably have a pretty good idea of what the two deep is going to be right now, but that's going to be a relative topic here today. We're going to talk about the depth chart, and we're going to break down the offense and the defense here. We'll even talk some special teams eventually, but today we're going to focus on the offensive side of the ball. And there's been lots of talk kind of this week about the quarterbacks, running backs, receivers. So we'll kind of touch on all of that here as we go through our depth chart. And I guess we'll just, no time to waste, no time like the present. So Danny, let's get to it. The most important position on the field, the past 4 years has been just not productive enough under Scott Frost. Whatever has happened under Adrian Martinez, he's talented, but, didn't produce in key moments. So just kind of to get to it, what's your quarterback depth chart, looking like to start the 2022 season for Nebraska football?
Casey Thompson at number 1, Chubba Purdy at number 2, Logan Smothers at number 3. I think it's interesting, and I wrote about this earlier this week, that Chubba was taking running reps with the ones. I think, by no means does that mean he's the starter, but I do like the fact that Nebraska is letting him take reps with the ones because that's how you develop. We've talked about depth before and the lack of it in past seasons. Now I'm hoping they kind of turn the corner in that regard and, start developing Purdy to be a good starter if and when Thompson leaves, because as you can remember, the depth behind Adrian Martinez was not strong at all.
Yeah, and I think that's one reason why, they just kind of kept trotting him out there. They never really recruited anybody over him. I think, McCaffrey was supposed to be kind of a true competitor, but, turns out he can't even he doesn't even play quarterback anymore. I mean, so that tells you how poorly Nebraska recruited the quarterback position. But yeah, I completely agree going into this season. I think it's going to be Casey Thompson starting, in Dublin. I think it's pretty clear Purdy is going to be number 2 and Smothers 3. Personally, I've said this before. I don't think Smothers is going to be on the roster after this season. That's just kind of the way. I just don't see a path to him starting unless he really just wants to stick it out at Nebraska. I think Purdy, I've seen him a couple times in scrimmages. They showed a highlight again of him, scoring a rushing touchdown, which is something that, Casey Thompson doesn't really bring. But it's going to be interesting. Mark Whipple said it, and it's true. You need 2 quarterbacks. You need more than one quarterback at some point this season, whether it's missing a few snaps, injury, or whatever. Casey Thompson's not going to take every snap from this season. I can almost guarantee it. It's hard to see that happening anymore. And whether he has to miss a game or you need Chubba to come in for a series or 2 in November, it's going to happen. They're going to have to, have him come in and play. And, it's important to have him ready. The other thing too is, it's not like Casey Thompson is a sure thing. Yes, he threw, he led the Big 12 in touchdown passes last year. I mean, Caleb Williamson started the full season. So, I mean, that statistic has an asterisk next to it. But the Texas only won 5 games last year. It's not like Texas was begging Casey Thompson to stay there and be their start. They recruited somebody else over him because they didn't think he was good enough. I mean, let's just be honest about that. So it's not like he's a surefire, going to lead this team to 8, 9 wins. And if he comes out of the gate struggling, Scott Frost doesn't have time for him to figure it out. They need to put someone in that position who can produce from day one. And if it's not Casey Thompson, Purdy has to be ready because Nebraska and Scott Frost can't afford another losing season. He'll be fired. The recruiting class will fall apart. Everything literally hinges on the start of the season for the Huskers.
Well, to your point, I think Texas is a very poorly run program. It shouldn't be. I mean, they have all the resources to be successful. They just, never seem to be able to get it done, and they always shoot themselves in the foot on and off the field. But yeah, I see, Casey Thompson being the starter. I'm surprised Smothers stuck around, to be honest with you, but that's good notch in the belt in terms of his competitiveness and his character and his will to compete. That really says a lot about him um, as a quarterback. And I'm interested to see if maybe if he sticks around, if he'll undergo a position change because it's not like he's not a good athlete. He's a very good athlete. So I'm curious if maybe we see him in certain packages or something, or if he moves to a different position because that could be possible. I mean, he's definitely got the athletic skill.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, quarterbacks have done, a common move for quarterbacks is to tight end, for instance. There's been plenty of quarterbacks that have kind of made that shift if you're, a bigger type. I don't know his measurables off the top of my head. I think he would need to fill out, obviously would have to fill out more, but he showed in that Iowa game that he can run the ball effectively. And, but I definitely think he can start at quarterback at the FBS level. Maybe I'm not sold that he's a power five starter yet, but he showed glimpses in that Iowa game. So you never know. I mean, if Thompson moves on, and it's him against Purdy, that's who's to say he doesn't develop this season under, Whipple, because that's the thing is guys are going to continually get better, week after week. We're still very early in the process. So, he could go through all of, next spring and then still have a chance if it by that point is clear, like, hey, I'm not going to be the guy, then, either switch positions or maybe go somewhere else. But yeah, what's kind of your expectation or what's your prediction? What do you think, if Casey starts the entire season, what's kind of your projected stat line for him?
Um, this is interesting because last year I don't think is a fair measuring stick because yesterday it came out that he tore the UCL and the RCL, I believe it was, in his thumb. So, you know, it's interesting that he had very good statistics with that tear. And he had 24 touchdowns and 9 interceptions last season. I would say probably those same numbers because Nebraska's going to want to use the running back room as well. I don't think it's going to be a completely pass heavy offense. So I don't think it's going to be a lack of Casey Thompson's skill, especially with that hand fully healed now. I think it's going to just be that they want to balance out the offense more. So, I mean, I know it's only one more touchdown, but I'd say 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and 2,500 yards would be a realistic stat line, especially with the early games in Nebraska's schedule. He could have a chance to really put up some good statistics with some of the easier games, early on.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. If he, starts all 12 games, if he doesn't hit 3,000 yards, I think I mean, 2,500 yards, that's barely over 200 a game, really. I don't think that's going to be good enough to win. I mean, unless the running game's really good and Anthony Grant's like really good. Yeah, I think he's got a good chance to hit 3,000 yards, 20 some touchdowns. They've got to he's got to get, I think, close to those metrics if this team's going to win, 8 or 9 games, which I think it does have the potential to do. But there's so many weapons in this offense. I really want to see it. I mean, Scott Frost has got to get this team averaging 30 points a game. I mean, it's just if Nebraska's not hitting that number this year, then he might need to go anyways because they've got to start scoring more points, and they've got all the talent in the world to do it. I think there's the chance for Casey Thompson to easily hit 3,000 yards if he, starts all those games. I mean, it's like 225 or two, it's not even that much. And I think with the way that Whipple wants to throw the ball, especially downfield, I definitely think there's a realistic chance, of it happening. But we'll see what happens with the running game. But yeah, I think 20 touchdowns and 2,500 to 3,000 yards is a pretty conservative estimate with Casey Thompson.
I want to see, them run the football a lot, and that's why I went a little bit more conservative. I want to see them get as many of the running backs on the field as they can because there is a lot of talent there. Again, I hate to keep harping on this, but to me, it comes back to development and continuing to use what you have in the running back room. Nebraska has some very good running backs in there, so I'd love to see them, you know, run the damn ball, as is the popular saying around here. So, I mean, I just think from a personnel standpoint that, if they don't give the running backs as much opportunity as possible, I think, that would be underutilizing the room. I mean, we have this depth. And I really want to see them use it.
Yeah, and as much as the game has turned into a spread, you have to run the football to win. Every team that makes the college football playoff, they can do two things. They can run the football and they can stop the run. I mean, go back and look at the four teams from last year. Every single one of those teams could run the ball effectively and they could also stop the run. So, as much as this game is, about scoring points and the spread offense, you still, if you can't stop the run and if you cannot run the football, especially, near the goal line, near the red zone and short yardage situations, you aren't going to win very much. And that's exactly what's happened with Nebraska the last few years, because push come to shove, they haven't been able to do, those two things when it's really mattered. But yeah,
They haven't, no.
but well, anyways, I was going to say that'll be a good transition to, we've seen lots of, great stuff about Anthony Grant. Seems like he's, sort of emerged as the starter, which we kind of both predicted in our, when we kind of talked about running backs last week. But now that we're doing the whole offense, we'll go back to it. What's kind of your depth chart, and not just your obviously, because running back is going to be more than one guy. It's not like quarterback. So what's your breakdown of your running back depth chart? Who's going to play the most? Who's going to see what kind of touches?
What I want and what I think is going to happen may be two different things, but I really, want to see Anthony Grant be that number one back. I was just looking back at some of his film last night, and he has all the skills, needed to be that top back. Um, he has the vision. He has the ability to change direction quickly. He's a north-south runner. I mean, he doesn't bounce to the outside unless absolutely necessary, which I kind of like because I feel like a lot of times when running backs bounce to the outside, they don't get the forward progress to get those extra yards. But I mean, I think it's Anthony Grant and then Ramir Johnson and Gabe Ervin. I was reading that Nebraska writer had Anthony Grant followed by Gabe Gabe Ervin and then Johnson, but I just don't see where they would put Johnson as the third running back based on the fact that Ervin was hurt last year. Like if it was me, if I was running the show, I would kind of ease Gabe back into things. I talked about it with somebody on Twitter last week. Yes, I know he's healthy. Yes, I know he's back at practice, but you know, I want we have the depth again in the running back room that we haven't really had before. I wouldn't mind easing Irvin into things and keeping Ramir in the second spot.
Yeah, that's where I don't really, I don't think it's going to matter too much about second or third or, because they're different players. Gabe Irvin brings a different skill set than Ramir Johnson. So, I think in terms of like the bell cow, it's going to be Anthony Grant. And then if he goes down, I think Gabe Irvin is going to be kind of the next guy to step up in that mix. I think Johnson, they have a whole different plan for. I think he's going to get his carries. I think he's going to get about, 5 to 10 carries a game is what I'm hoping. And then I hope to see him catching about 5 to 10 passes a game. The little swing routes, option routes, using
Yeah.
him in the slot quite a bit. I think we're going to see that. I think you could see, 4 wide receiver sets with him, kind of him and Trey Palmer out there in the slots on the opposite sides of the field. So, that's the kind of stuff that Nebraska needs to do. He's too talented and those throws are too easy for the quarterback. It just boggles my mind that, those. But that was the thing is, Adrian Martinez oftentimes on swing routes he would throw it behind the guy, and it's like you can't if you're trying to set up a little swing route and get the guy going upfield on a bubble screen for a block, you can't throw it behind him. The whole point is to get the momentum going for it's like trying if you're messing up the handoff every single time when you hand it off to the running back. So I mean, even on those simple throws, you need to be accurate so that guys can actually try to make yards after the reception. A lot of that is determined on the accuracy of the throw, slant patterns, all those types of stuff. So, hopefully we'll see Nebraska utilize that more. But I do see Anthony Grant, emerging as that guy. And one thing that's interesting, just looking at the Nebraska roster, is Anthony Grant, Ramir Johnson, Gabe. I mean, Gabe Urban's on. He's just a redshirt freshman. I don't think he even played 4 games last year, so he's got freshman eligibility. Johnson's a sophomore. Anthony Grant. So all these guys are going to be back next year. At least they should be, according to I mean, there could be departures and whatever, but I think it's an exciting future, for Nebraska's backfield to see, if these guys all emerge because they could potentially all be back next season too.
And I think Brian Applewhite's the right guy to do it. I really do. I think, he can get the most out of these backs. And to kind of go back on one of your points, Chris, you're right. Because, you know, I keep forgetting that we have Mark Whipple now, and he has a more pass-friendly offense, so to speak, so that will take some of the load off Grant. It won't need to be a constant rotation of backs with, quite honestly, predictable play calling like we saw last year. It's going to be a whole different ballgame. So I do agree with you definitely on Grant, and I'm just excited to see what they do with the room because I feel like Johnson can kind of be like a hybrid player, like what do they call those duck backs? As a receiver and as a running back, kind of like Wandale Robinson was, but hopefully better executed.
Yeah, well, I think Wandale was, they tried to use him in that way, and it was dumb. It was dumb. I can't say anything. They wasted one of the best recruits that they had because they didn't know how to use him properly, and that basically sums up, the entire Frost era. I think they just. But anyways, not to go on a tangent, but one article I wrote this week for Husker Big Red, and it was Mark Whipple was talking about using Johnson like Brian Westbrook, back in the Eagles, so people remember him. He was a guy that he didn't always rush for 1,000 yards. I think most years he was a little under that, but he always had like 70 or 80 catches. They did a lot of option routes with him. And so I think, man, if you got Ramir Johnson out there with a linebacker and you got him running, I mean, he's going to win that matchup 9 times out of 10. And even if the guy makes the tackle, you're still putting, I mean, I'll take that. Ramir Johnson one-on-one against most Big Ten linebackers. I think he's going to make that guy miss quite a few times. And that just was never in the playbook last year. I'm not sure why. Even after he had that game, he ran that great wheel route against Michigan, caught the touchdown, and then they never went. I didn't understand the offensive philosophy. But anyways,
I don't think many of us did, to be honest with you. I really don't think many of us did. And it kind of just, even not to go on a tangent with this, but even when you listen to the current coaching staff speaks, it just kind of highlights how far behind, for lack of a better term, the previous coaching staff was because, you know, I think there were a lot of gaps there, and hopefully we're going to see some of these gaps being closed. I've been let down too many times to say that's a definite thing, but hopefully we'll see some of these gaps being closed.
yeah, and we'll get to there's been some interesting stuff this week. I don't know if you saw this, and we're going to talk about our projected O line in a second. But did you see this yesterday where Scott Frost said that they've got the trackers on the effort trackers on players, and that the offensive line is basically giving out like twice the effort that it was a year ago. That I mean, I'm not saying like more. I just thought that was a pretty striking indictment of Greg Austin to say that a new coach has the guys working literally exerting twice as much effort. I mean, it's not like Scott Frost is being like, hey, these guys are practicing harder. It's like, no, scientifically with these measurements, they're working like twice as hard as they were last year.
They probably didn't even have those meters under Austin, or they did, and they just didn't use them because they knew the line sucked. I mean, Austin, like Austin set that unit so far back, and it's really telling how Rayola. I was kind of hesitant when they brought him in as a coach, but I've been pleased with what I've seen just his energy and intensity, and he has a lot of work cut out for him. And you know, I think science can only tell so much, but it is telling that they're giving, what do you say, twice the amount of effort or twice the amount of
Something like,
intensity.
yeah, I don't remember exactly what it was. People will have to look it
I
up,
saw
but
that too. Yeah.
I might not be stating it right, but I just know that I was surprised that it was that much of a difference. But yeah, I love Rayola. I think I've said this before. I think it helps having these Nebraska guys and alums on the staff. They understand Nebraska. They care about it. I'm not saying that the other coaches don't care, but you care a little bit more if it's your alma mater. And so I think getting Mickey Joseph back, getting Rayola. I think getting Trev Alberts back was a good thing too, on another front. But yeah, I think everything's steering in the right direction with this program, but now we just have to produce on the field to keep that momentum going forward because it feels like a brand new staff to me. It's like a second chance here for Scott, but he's got to take advantage of it and has to be. He can't have any missteps at this point. He's given away all of his goodwill. It's the buyouts lower. Like if it doesn't happen, he's gone. I think that that's been pretty clear.
Yeah, definitely. And not to go on a tangent again about this, but I wonder if Fred Hoiberg is in a similar situation as well. But we can talk about that at another day.
Yeah, and it's been a good week for Fred. I really like Eli Rice. I thought that was a great pickup. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I th- I like how Fred's recruiting in this class. I think he's finally starting to figure out like I can't transfer in everybody. I've got to get some kids that are in the 1 to 200 range. I need to develop. You need to get those kids and keep them at Nebraska for 2 or 3 years. Develop them. That's how you can eventually win in the Big Ten. So I don't. I would give Fred a little more leeway. Like I said, the basketball program, especially going into the Big Ten. I mean, I think it's just more of an uphill climb. But we'll see. He's got to do better than he's got to get more wins though. He's got to show improvement.
Chase Clemens is good too, the other recruit in the 2023 class. I think he's pretty good. But yeah, I mean, this is the most frustrating thing. Recruiting has never been a problem for Fred in terms of talent. It's been about putting a good product on the floor. But right now, it's football season, and that's all I'm focused on because I don't know if I want to focus on basketball much for next year, but we'll see. Maybe they'll surprise me, and things will be good there. But I just don't see it.
Yeah, it's well, the Big Ten's tough, so we'll see. There's no, it makes it hard when you're still a somewhat decent program because certainly Nebraska was horrible, but literally every team in the Big Ten is good, so it makes it tough. But getting back to
Makes those non-conference wins in November very
yep, for
important.
sure. But getting back to our depth chart here, so I think one of the most interesting positions to watch this spring, in spring and fall camp has been wide receiver. Mickey Joseph said he wants, about 6 guys to play, and despite we saw the injury to DeColdis Crawford this week, so I believe he's going to be out for a long time or might miss the entire season. So he's not really going to be in the mix. But there's a couple freshmen, kind of in the mix. But what's your top 3 going into the season?
Trey Palmer, Alante Brown, and I think Omar Manning. I think Joseph was really high on Manning, and with Manning, it's not been about talent. We know he has that. He was the top, you know, JUCO rated recruit when Nebraska brought him in. It's just been about, you know, I don't want to harp on him too much, but it's just been about getting him on the field and, you know, making sure he gets the football. I mean, I think Mickey Joseph represents a fresh start for a lot of the wide receivers in the room, and so I'm hoping Manning can benefit that. And then Palmer, he has that downfield playmaking ability. Nebraska really focused on that type of receiver, and when Joseph came to town, and then Brown, I think Brown Frost said I think 2 weeks ago that he was emerging as a leader in the wide receivers room. So I'm excited to see what he can do because, when Nebraska got him to commit, I believe it was 2019, December 2019, if I'm not mistaken. He all of his highlights showed him being a fast, explosive receiver, and we just haven't seen that in full yet. So I definitely consider those three and I'd be excited to see what each of them could do under Joseph.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I think it's going to be, Trey Palmer, I think is a guaranteed starter. I think he's kind of the number one guy. And then I do think Omar Manning will start. I look at Nebraska basically as having three starting wide receivers because what I see their starting 11 or their base 11 offense kind of being, 11 personnel, three receivers, one back, one tight end. I don't think there's I don't know if we're going to use any like fullback type thing. I'm sure they'll have some people kind of in that role, but that seems like what the offense is going to look like mostly to me. And so I think Marcus Washington is going to also be on the outside. Alante Brown is
Mm.
I think going to be in the mix. I think he's right there in the top four. But if you look at their college production, I mean, Alante Brown has what 3 or 4 catches. I don't remember. He had a few catches last year. Marcus Washington doesn't have huge production, but he caught, I think, 18 passes for like 278 yards or something like that. A couple touchdowns.
In like 2
Yeah, and
touchdowns, yeah.
he has that kind of rapport with Casey Thompson. He's a veteran, so I think he's going to be out there. And then I think Oliver Martin's going to be in the mix too. Is just kind of a savvy veteran guy. He's kind of had injuries throughout his career, but he's gotten healthier, and I think he'll be in the mix there as well. So yeah, I think Nebraska's really deep at that spot. I think some of the other freshmen could get in there too as well. But yeah, I think there's a lot to feel good about with the wide receiver room.
Oh, yeah, and, I totally forgot about Washington, but yeah, I believe he'll be a starter, so maybe, Manning, Palmer, and Washington, because there was talk that Washington's kind of emerged as a guy that, must see the field. There's just so many, names at the wide receiver position with good talent that you wanna you have depth to choose from and tangible depth. I feel like we've said that for a lot of positions, but it's finally nice to have the ability to mix and match and even have these conversations without kind of dreading them and going, ugh, like what does this room come to?
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I mean, there's been other guys mentioned. Brody Belt. I've heard his name mentioned a few times. You know, Janrian Bonner, the freshman's been. He's kind of impressed, I think. And another guy that Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. The kid from New Mexico State that
Hmm.
transferred. I mean, he was a really productive receiver, and I thought it was smart to kind of get him and Marcus Washington, because I think that the bottom line is that, if Omar Manning and Alante Brown don't step up this year, Nebraska has two guys that have, proven production, at the FBS level. Well, actually three guys with Washington, Garcia Castaneda, and then Trey Palmer. So, I think you've got those three guys that have proven that they can produce at this level. You could kind of throw Oliver Martin in there a little bit, but not quite as much. And then you have Brown and Manning, who are kind of two guys that just haven't quite lived up to their potential, but they do have a lot of it. And I think Omar Manning especially is the guy that I think is going to essentially be that number one on the outside. Trey Palmer is going to be kind of that number one on the slot, but that big play receiver, I think Omar Manning can hopefully fill that role. But even this last week, Mickey Joseph was kind of getting on him and, kind of ripped him in the media a little bit for not practicing for, he called it nicks. That's what he said, so Omar Manning still is a senior, Mickey Joseph's calling you out. So you got to toughen up a little bit.
And it will be interesting to see where Brody Belt falls into the equation because I remember in the spring, Mickey Joseph gave him some really high praise. So I'll be interested to see where he kind of falls. And yeah, if Mickey Joseph is calling you out, then you gotta get your crap together. And that's always been one of the knocks on Manning that he's not mentally tough or he doesn't seem all in at times. I'm hoping he can kind of get that sorted out this year because Mickey Joseph will help him and improve him, but he's also not going to take any BS. So it's really in Manning's in Manning's hands. The ball is in Manning's court in terms of how he wants this to go.
Yeah, so receiver, it's going to be interesting to see how those guys develop. talked a little bit about tight end, or at least tight end Travis Vocaleck. He was one of our breakout candidates. We both picked him as our breakout candidate for offense. So obviously we, think he's going to start. But what do you think the depth chart is going to look, behind Vocaleck? I think it's pretty clear. I mean, he went to Big Ten media days for a reason. Like, he's going to start, but who's going to play behind him? How do you see that depth chart stacking up?
Hmm. This one's a little tough. Um, Hickman and then Chancellor Brewington, Chris Hickman and Chancellor Brewington. I mean, the one thing about Chancellor Brewington that I noticed last year was that he can block. He can block really, really well. So there's definitely, especially with an offense that will use the run a little bit, hopefully, there's room for blockers. And then Hickman, I know um, he got high praise last spring. I'm not sure if he saw the field. You probably know better than me. I was busy watching the quarterbacks and wide receivers more so last year, to be honest with you. But I think it goes Vocalick, Hickman, and then Brewington because there are good tight ends waiting in the wings, and we talked about this last week. But health is been the big thing for this positional group in particular.
Yeah, I think, in terms of receiving, I think Vocaleck's going to be the guy, that gets most of those targets. But
Mm.
yeah, Brewington, I think, is going to, he's an interesting candidate because we talked about, there's not, like fullbacks, but you need somebody to be in that role, and that's usually like a tight end. And he looks like a guy who could kind of be that role, and so that is a really important job for, tight ends, is to be blockers. And they have a lot of them, playing off the line of scrimmage now. They're kind of that move tight end, but almost moving as a blocker, where they're moving him around the line of scrimmage. They'll bump him back to a fullback. It's nice to have almost like a true H back type. So yeah, I think all the Rollins, Hickman, Brewington, I think they're all going to play. I think we'd all like to see Thomas Fedoni out there, and he was seen running stairs, and he's kind of the key prize. But you know hopefully we just see something out of him this year. I just want to see him get back on the field sometime this season, get into some games, catch some passes, and then get full bore into next year. After Vocalek is gone and stuff like that. But yeah, I,
If nothing else, just for his mental, for Thomas Fedori's mental state, because you know I had to go through some rehab from an injury last year, and it takes a toll on you mentally. And I can imagine he's going through the same thing. So, if nothing else, for his mental state, I'd love to see him back on the field just to get back to doing what he loves.
yeah, and he, a top 100 recruit. I mean, I believe he was either the number one or
Yeah,
number two tight end in the class. So, he's a guy that Nebraska needs to produce. It's like, you look at some of Scott Frost's biggest recruiting wins. We talked about it before, but McCaffrey, Wandale Robinson, Fedoni, so far hasn't been much to show for it. So that's a big reason why Nebraska football is where it's at right now.
yeah, it's kind of puzzling, and you hate to make excuses, but it does seem like there's a lot of bad luck there. I mean, hopefully that changes this year because I think with the recruiting skills that guys like Mickey Joseph, Rayola, Whipple, Bill Bush in particular, I think too. I think they'll be able to get more of these high profile players and hopefully they'll, s- that'll translate into wins and success.
And another thing that I think is overlooked in recruiting is the ability of the staff to evaluate and identify players. If fans, a lot of times we look at recruiting rankings, but I would trust most football coaching staff over those rankings. So you see programs all the time that will get commitments, and then they'll be lower, and then after they're committed to a certain program, those you'll see that ranking go up. So it's like Nebraska needs to hit on more of these players. Their coaches need to do a better job of evaluating, because Nebraska, the bottom line is they're going to have mostly 3-star players. So you need to find the ones that are going to fit your system, that are going to be able to, grow and develop and produce. And the previous staff just did not do a very good job of that. The recruiting strategy, I mean, and Frost, needs to be in charge of all that. But the positional coaches, it wasn't working. So hopefully, this recruiting momentum will go forward. And offensive line, that is one place where Greg Austin, for all the poor coaching he did on the field, he did get some solid recruits. Teddy Prajaka, Corcoran, who's back healthy, it looks like. So what does your starting five look like? The offensive line is a huge question mark for a lot of Nebraska fans, but what's your front five going into Northwestern?
Um, Projaka, and then probably at left. So Projaka would be at left tackle. Maybe Kevin Williams at the guard, and then Trent Hickson. I know that he has impressed some coaches, followed by Cochran and Bryce Benhart at right tackle. Although I think Hunter Anthony could make a play for that spot. Um, in terms of that position.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I believe they've Corcoran. I think he's going to start on the left side. So I think we're going to have Prajaka, Corcoran at the left side, then Hickson, and looks like to me that Brock Bando is going to end up get that first shot at right guard the senior. That's what I think. There's certainly some other guys, going to be in the mix for that, and then Benhart, I think, yeah, out at right tackle. Um, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. If he can hold on to that job. Keith Williams could slide out there. There's some other options at tackle, but that's, I think, going to be the starting five. Assuming everybody's healthy. But I'm definitely concerned about depth there, and I'm concerned. There's a few spots where I'm kind of worried about things. Keith Williams is one guy I feel good about, kind of coming off the bench, and I think he could play a few different positions. Being 6'5", 305. But yeah, it's not, you look at running back and receiver and you feel pretty good about the depth, but the depth of the offensive line seems a little shaky.
Yeah, kind of like the depth at tight end, in my opinion, as well. There's certain positions offensively where the depth is better than others, but I'll be interested to see how things play out on the line. I think, at least for the Northwestern game, I think you're probably right in the sense that Rock Bando will have the right guard spot, and he's been practicing well, but I'm wondering if at some point Cochran will slide in there. I think the fact that he just returned to practice a couple of days ago, um, it may be better if Nebraska rests him, but I think maybe towards the middle point of the year we may see him slide into that spot.
Instead of, because I think he's been playing left guard. So right now,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah.
yeah, I think
So,
I think they're expecting him to be the left guard starter, but
oh, okay. So then
but
Okay, so then
and then,
okay, yeah. I'm just reading the depth chart now
uh,
because there are a bunch of names on there, and you're right. The depth there at the position in terms of guard and tackle in particular is kind of shaky.
and I could see a situation where if Ben Hart struggles at right tackle, which he did last year, where Corcoran has to move out. I think they're trying to have Corcoran, at left guard right now in the hope that Ben Hart works out at right tackle. But if not, then they're going to have to make some adjustments, and that could lead to somebody some shuffling around on the offensive line there. But hopefully Donovan Raiola can get that group figured out, and I think that's going to be a key point for the offense. So overall, we've kind of went through our predictions. What how many points? I guess let's just go right there. How many points do you think Nebraska is going to score per game? Are they going to hit that 30-point mark?
Hmm. I'd say probably they have the talent for over 30. Will they get there as everybody adjusts to the new offense right away? I don't think so, but I think as the middle point of the season comes along, you're gonna see them start to hit that 30-point plateau. I'd say they're gonna, when all is said and done, they're going to average just over 30. But I think in the first couple of games, it's not going to be easy as all the new pieces adjust to the new offensive style.
Yeah, and I'd have to double check this. I looked this stat up a couple weeks ago. I believe that the Huskers have only averaged 30 points a game once under Scott Frost. I think that was his first season, and they actually had like 8 or 9 games in a row where they went over 450 yards of offense. So after that first year, it looked like the offense was really going to get humming, and then it never really. It just kind of was stagnant. It never got better. But I do think, yeah, this team should be able to get, I think, about 33, 34 points a game. I mean, if it's gonna, that's what it's gonna take, I think, to win about 8 games this year. They consistently got to get in that range, 8, 9 wins. So yeah, that's gonna be my prediction. I'm gonna say they're gonna get it. I do think, yeah, I could see them starting a little bit slow because, yeah, it's a lot of new pieces to gel. So maybe like 32 points a game, but I think this is going to be a pretty dynamic offense. Hopefully, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but it tastes pretty good right now.
Well, we'll see what happens in just a little under 2 weeks. I mean, you know, I don't think Northwestern is going to be an easy game, but I think it's going to be a nice warm-up game for the offense. I think it's going to be a good test because Northwestern always plays, tough. So I'll be interested to see what this offense does. There's a lot of pressure riding on the offense, but I think they can get it done. I think they can get over 30 points.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask one more question and then we'll wrap it up, and we'll be coming back with another episode, later this week where we'll break down our defensive depth chart, for the 2022 season, and then it's going to be full on to Northwestern. We are going to also be putting out a full long season prediction. We're going to go game by game, so we'll tell you, you'll know where we stand here on the Husker Big Red podcast before the season kind of kicks off. But the last thought that I had is, Danny, when do you expect Scott Frost to name a starting quarterback?
Probably by this week, I would say. I mean, it's all but been officially named. I mean, you had him last week say that, Thompson was probably the number one starter. And, you know, we kind of knew he was the number one starter when he transferred in December. But I think probably by this week, just so Nebraska can get kind of quote unquote a week in with their starting quarterback before Northwestern for game preparation. Um, you know, I think I'll probably name it this week. Probably I'm gonna guess by the end of the week, just to give a little bit more of that competition feel to guys like Purdy. But I think he's gonna name it before next week so that the team can have a full slate of practice with Thompson as the official starting quarterback.
Yeah, I would think, sometime this week would make sense, but, I believe, unless I'm wrong, but I believe they're supposed to have one kind of more scrimmage, and I'm sure they want to see Monday.
Monday.
Okay. So I'm sure they want to see how that goes. I think we're not going to hear a whole lot before then, but yeah, sometime in the middle of the week, it wouldn't surprise me if they, came out and said Casey Thompson was their starter. Notre Dame announced their starter yesterday, even though there wasn't that much of it. Everybody pretty much knew who it was going to be, but they were kind of making it out like it was a competition. I think every school wants to say it's a competition, but 99% of the time you have a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
But if we don't
Yeah.
hear it this week, then that's going to have me a little more interested that maybe Chubb is coming on, and maybe it's not quite so clear. Maybe we'll even see Chuba play a little bit in that Northwestern game. Who knows?
Knowing Nebraska, they will announce it the week of the Northwestern game, and then that will send everybody into a frenzy, and then we'll have 75,000 theories as to why Scott Frost didn't name a starter 2 weeks ago. But, we'll see. I'm hoping it's by the end of this week just for, posterity's sake. And I do think, just to kind of quickly go back on what you said a little bit, Chuba is, you know, he's going to be a solid quarterback, and I think his starting time will come. I just don't think it's right now.
Yeah, I don't think it's right now either. I'm just interested to see how much Nebraska tries to sprinkle him in. Not saying even giving him a series or two, but I'm wondering just to get him a little more game experience, and um, just in certain situations where maybe he could use his legs, and also still be a thrower. So I'm just interested to see if they try to find some type of role to keep him engaged and to also just get him a little bit of the experience, without like letting him take over the offense, but just kind of a few snaps here or there, not just mop up time. But that's why we have to wait for the games, and we'll see what happens.
And this is also kind of interesting because in previous years, and I'm not dogging on him for this at all, but Adrian Martinez didn't really have a quarterback competition and he didn't really need to practice really hard because he knew he was going to be the starting quarterback. I mean, and now, you know, we know that Casey Thompson is going to be a starting quarterback, but Purdy's waiting in the rings right there. We have good depth. We've said it a lot, but it's so important. We have good depth in comparison to other years. So it's nice to not have a quarterback competition per se, but it's nice to have somebody breathing down the starter's neck a little bit just for competition's sake and keeping Thompson on his toes.
Yep, competition, iron sharpens iron, so that's what they always say.
Absolutely.
But on that note, we will wrap up another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast. Make sure that you are subscribing to our podcast here on Apple and Spotify, anywhere else that take in your podcasts. We've got lots of great content at both of our websites, huskerbigred.com. That's me, Chris Peterson, thegreatcornholio.org from Danny Gillette. So check us out for your Husker content. You can also find we have some great YouTube videos up, so make sure you check out the Husker Big Red YouTube page, and we will be up with another episode with our defensive depth chart predictions soon. So, as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.